Hi Dave.
Hi Carl, you alright?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. So, congratulations for passing your Part 3.
Thank you very much.
So you passed last week?
Wednesday last week, yeah.
Wednesday last week. Fantastic. And what was the overall result?
8:45.
So, 45.
Yes.
Was this your first attempt?
It was my first attempt.
Fantastic. What a great score.
Thank you.
45. So the reason that I'm doing these podcast interviews is for our listeners to get an idea of how you achieved such a great score. Before I go into your Part 3 though, how long did your training process take from beginning to end?
I started the process in May this year, and I say passed Part 3 last week, so all in all about 5 months I think it was.
And how did you find that?
Intense at times, spending a lot of time trying to reflect on what I was doing, picking up on some support where needed from yourself and the other trainers such as Dawn, Mark and Nikki. It made it easier as time was progressing and the more I developed my skills a little bit more. So yeah, it was hard but well worth it.
And just for our listeners, did you go on to a trainee licence?
I did, yes.
And did you find that beneficial for this process?
Hugely. I'd be honest, I couldn't have done it, I don't think, without having gone on that pink licence and had the opportunity to sort of hone my skills in and sort of put everything into practice, what I was reading, the training that we went through. It was invaluable.
Excellent. Okay, so how did you prepare for your Part 3 then?
I just took every opportunity I physically had to spend more time going back over the paperwork we'd gone through in the books, tapping into your knowledge, tapping into knowledge from sort of Dawn, Mark and Nikki, the other trainers, and spending a lot of time for myself just constantly reflecting on everything I was doing, whether it went well, whether it went bad, could I do something different, could I make an adaptation even if it was good to improve it, and that's kind of what I spent my time doing for the whole 5 months really.
Okay, so was there an element of preparation that you done prior to the test?
I think for me it was just a lot of it was looking at where my strengths were as an instructor and kind of really focused on that. I think I kind of undernard several ways of working my Part 3, decided that it was better to stick with my strength and do exactly what we teach our students to do. Have confidence in your own ability and keep it simple.
So what lesson did you plan for your Part 3? Which one did you do? What did you do?
I structured the lesson around observation, anticipation and planning, with the dual carriageway join and leave and dual carriageway drive as the topic in the background and an area in which to work in.
So why did you choose that in particular then?
My background previously coming into this was where my strength was for dual carriageway work, motorway work, so I spent a lot of my time over the years and felt that I had a fairly good understanding, even more so than the other areas in which I worked. So I felt that I was more confident with that. I knew I could talk about the examples that I needed to give with ease, and I was happy that I knew I could respond appropriately should other situations arise or develop whilst on the dual carriageway.
And what about your pupil then? So tell us a little bit more about the pupil that you took on your test day.
Yeah, my pupil was a full licence holder. Held a licence for 39 years. He won't mind me saying he's in his mid to late 50s. He passed, let's say, a test 39 years ago and never developed himself since then, never had any additional training. Openly admitted he took things for granted and was complacent. He just drove for the sake of driving and kind of really wanted to see if there was anything he could do to keep himself safe, and especially with his younger grandkids now in the car, wanted to develop some skills to see if he could better himself. We kind of worked on it together and see what we could come up with for him.
And how did you find taking a full licence holder?
It had its challenges, I won't lie. It's not the bread and butter. We spend our time teaching learner drivers to drive, and the first full licence holder that I had encountered, if you like, doing this, it was challenging. It was an eye opener to say the least.
So what happened in the lesson? How did you have to adapt the lesson much? Just so that our listeners sort of get an idea of what sort of things the examiners are looking for in that Part 3. Can you summarise your lesson? how you helped your pupil?
Yeah, there was several adaptations I had to make. It was quite obvious that there was no need for being a full licence holder to go down the route initially of full instruction. It was touched upon as a sort of teaching style and sort of method to go through to kind of encourage that support and that learning. We pitched it effectively at sort of a guided element through Q&A, and that was deemed appropriate for the student. Went through various different sort of examples as we were joining the dual carriageway. Again, when we were on the dual carriageway, looking for those opportunities to kind of really broaden the student's knowledge, asking them kind of what it was that he's used to doing previously. Would he position himself in a certain way, and how would he respond to something developing? And we managed to kind of adjust and adapt the lesson accordingly to that.
Okay. So, what sort of things in particular did you have to deal with? Being a full licence holder, had they sort of slipped into some bad habits?
Yeah, there was a few bad habits. Mirror checks, for one, was definitely high on the list of not being sort of checked as frequently as I think he believed he was doing it. We kind of had the discussion whilst we were driving along that there were a few points that we wanted to discuss regarding that, but we kind of put a pin in it, held it back, and we discussed that later on in the lesson, should we kind of feel that it was more relevant then. We had more things that we needed to deal with. For example, we were coming up the slip road to join the dual carriageway. A couple of cars were in front of us. He held back lovely, to allow the vehicles in front of him to join. But because we'd gone up in the right-hand lane, he saw a car to the right of him and immediately went for the accelerator to cut out in front of the vehicle. So I had to step in and verbally take control of the lesson, bring him back in and get him just to kind of hold off that gas and then filter him behind the vehicle. Something that he'd never have done and would never have considered. And I asked the questions of him as to why he felt I'd done that, and was able to kind of understand it. But the more I developed that with him, and didn't just leave it at that kind of acceptance of his answer, developed that understanding of a little bit further and gave him more knowledge as to why, where and how and what, when we do it, so to speak. And it made such a difference for him. It was quite nice to see a change in his drive very quickly.
So you took control of the lesson, and I guess that's something that some of our listeners might be quite concerned about with a full licence holder. How far do I go? Because this is something that we'd naturally do with somebody who's an L learner, because we have to manage that risk. So when it comes to a full licence holder, I guess that's something probably in the back of your mind. Do I come in, control the lesson, without being too over instructing, I guess you could say? Was that in the back of your mind, how far you actually would take control of a full licence holder?
Yeah, definitely.
Without belittling them?
Definitely. I think that was the key there, is the belittling and almost patronising. You kind of had that in the back of your mind, thinking that's the last thing you want to do. They're there to offer that support for you to encourage their development, give them something they don't necessarily know, or kind of increase the knowledge they do have. So yeah, it was a hard juggling act to kind of really establish how far you can sort of take it, whether it be verbal intervention through sort of directly telling, or whether it was a case of answering questions and asking those questions and answers, really.
Yeah.
And that was one thing I learned from this whole process, that actually with a full licence holder, yes, there are times you do need to verbally intervene, but you can do so even easier using that Q&A. You don't want to be doing it to death, but at the same time you've got to kind of really establish their understanding, and you'll get more of a response, because you seem to get a more theoretical response than you do an actual practical, in comparison to our learner drivers.
So that's the key, is it, with a full licence holder? The correct pitches, lots of questions to establish what their knowledge is and help them out with maybe the knowledge they've never received before, or they've forgotten, because maybe, as you said, your pupil's been driving for some time. Maybe not so much traffic on the road when they learn to drive. Things are completely different now, aren't they? There's a lot more traffic on the road. So great. You came back with a great result, and obviously you had feedback from your test examiner.
Yeah.
45. Brilliant. So in 12 months' time, you're going to have a standards check. What's your goal for the next few months before you sit your standards check? What would you do differently to maybe get that score higher?
I think from my point of view, reflecting after the part 3, understanding where I came in to give direction and be assertive, to kind of take that control, to step back and ask more questions for that Q&A, and kind of get the answers back from them, so I can develop it and work on it. That was something I'm going to take away from this. For me, it was an opportunity to actually get, with a full licence holder especially, to get them to put themselves into the position of another road user, especially when they're looking at carrying out a manoeuvre that potentially they would have otherwise done without that support, how that would impact somebody else, and actually how they would feel themselves. So I'll take that away from me, and I'm starting to bring that into my own lessons now more regularly, that getting my students to think about that when making those decisions at roundabouts or junctions. If you was to pull out here and you had a vehicle coming alongside there, how would you feel if someone did that to you? Yeah. And you can see that kind of penny drop a little bit, and it's changed me with how I give my lessons already for the benefit of my students, for the better.
Yeah, so I guess what you're already talking about there a little bit is about reflection, and I guess that self-reflection continues now, doesn't it?
Yes.
Until you're continuously, not even just up to your standards check and beyond. I guess that's going to make you a better instructor and benefit your pupils in the long run.
Yes.
So what would be your advice then, Dave, to those that are now preparing for their part 3?
Best advice I can give is to utilise as much information and knowledge from your trainers. Through Next Gen with Carl, Dawn, Nikki and Mark, you couldn't ask for better trainers in my opinion. I think you just got to tap into them. Use each of your lessons that you have on your pink licence to kind of go through that part 3 checklist, in your mind, working out, have I achieved that? Could I have done better with that? And don't just sit because you think you've got a 2 or 3. Try and better yourself. Even if you do get a 3, there's always going to be something you can do better to make it easier. But you need to give yourself time. You need to go effectively almost above and beyond. Try not to get kind of swallowed up in the emotion of doing the lessons and constantly doing them. You need to kind of give that time to come in and see your trainer, spend that time with them, and take every opportunity there is, because the more prepared you can be, the easier this process is going to become. And lastly, really look at it as being an interview for your licence. Don't look at it as a lesson, because it's not a true reflection of what we do in a lesson. A lesson could be an hour, 2 hours long, and intensive at 6. We're trying to give somebody an idea of what we can do in 40 minutes. Go into that with a mindset of I'm being interviewed to have my licence, and show them the best of what you can do. I had that in mind with all the training. I felt I was prepared as much as I could be. I surprised myself with what I scored. I honestly thought I didn't do quite as good as I had done. I was pleasantly surprised. But yeah, just keep at it, keep working as hard as you can, and it will happen.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time.
No problem at all.
And again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to seeing you through your standards check in 11 to 12 months' time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Dan.
No problem at all. Thank you.